So, good morning, everybody. Hopefully rested and ready to roll for today. So, what we're going to do, just a little highlight. We first will be talking about child abuse and neglect, recognition, and prevention, which is like not an exciting topic for 9 a.m. But it's super important because a lot of times teachers are the ones who are on the front line and see things that other people don't pick up on as easily. So if you think about it, when you're in the classroom, the kids a lot of times are with you as many hours in the day as they are with their parents. Awake hours, sometimes more. So interesting. So anyway, so the mandated reporter is the basic idea behind what we're talking about today. And then for the first session this morning, and we have some activities I want to have you moving around. And then we will do student teaching seminar kind of orientation, so to speak, talk about expectations and any questions that you have before you go out. And then this afternoon, we'll talk about TCAP. So I'm going to explain what it is, what you have to do, and give you access to your syllabus, and so you can look at things ahead. And my goal is that this next week, if you're not in the schools, you can do some things ahead and just have them out of the way. So that's the plan. So if you have your computers, this is the address for our Padlet, which has everything on it today. And then also, you can scan it with QR. Do you guys use QR codes? No. That's a good point.
Sadly.
So the Padlet, once you pull it up, will look like okay. So Padlet disappeared when I pulled up my. So all right, so it is https ://padlet.com /jswan61 /5 FMA19 HY 4J F, I think it's IBZO.
What was it?
There's
nothing
nothing.
Can you copy and paste so I can email it to us?
Yes, I can.
Email it.
What was the name of the software yesterday that you can put in a URL?
Bitly.
Really?
Ah,
That makes a difference. That was a good pop quiz question.
it says letting me copy. There it is. Oh, I sent you all an invitation for student teaching seminar. I will
Oh yeah, your inbox, you can do it. Yep, off versus select chorus. Yeah.
Yes. Here we go. I'm sorry, this is far more clunky than I expected. I was trying out the stuff that she showed us yesterday. So hopefully that pops up pretty quickly.
I got a message from Dr. Swansky.
Did you get it?
On Canvas?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, in Canvas.
I got it. Here we go.
All right. So let me just kind of explain what we're doing. This first, I wanted you to have a copy of everything. So the first post-it there is the presentation that I'm giving today. And the second slide in has a QR code and all of that. These are some activities we're going to do. This is a copy of what you have in front of you, so you have a digital copy of it as well. And then the other two are related to activities that we're doing in a few minutes. So, all right. What I want to do, let's go to the first page of this handout. So the goal for us today will be able to effectively report child abuse or maltreatment and neglect. We'll look at situations to see whether there's a probable cause of suspecting maltreatment or abuse or neglect. And then we'll also look at some of the indicators. What are some things that you would be a red flag that there might be a problem? And then also talk about some of the legal frameworks, and we'll be looking at states in which you're thinking about teaching. So kind of branch out a little bit there. So that is the goal as we begin. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. All right. So, let's talk for a few minutes about what is a mandated reporter. I'm going to leave it there. So, I'm going to split you in half. I'm going to mix up the groups as we do things. First time we split, so Cassidy on over. You're going to go to the back paper back there, and you two are going to come up here, and I want you to see if you can come up with a definition for mandated reporter. What is it? Okay? And at the same time, I also want you to see if you can come up with a definition for child abuse and maltreatment. Just a whiteboard marker.
Oh, it's not up there? I left it on the little area.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, it's that part of your job, like content posts.
then see if you can define child abuse, and see if you can define maltreatment. So when you were done, you pull your thing there, your whole device, and then bring it up around them side by side. These are a little bit hard to define. I mean, we feel like we know what it is, but then when you have to really nail it down and define it, it's a little bit tricky. They're words that we hear. Just think of the whole statement. Yeah. There's teamwork there.
I'm writing these in markers. They're very easy to
They are
You
nice.
could use like actual markers in there. Oh, you guys can.
No. This isn't really a topic that you should read.
Yeah, whatever. Ours is intense. Ours is very intense.
Alright.
Go back to Bible.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys can
Yeah.
use manipulate child abuse.
Yeah.
So, as I said, we hear these words, and you know, especially we hear child abuse, we hear maltreatment, we hear those words, but sometimes we don't necessarily have a really good definition or have a full grasp until you have to define it. So, mandated report. Let's see. Someone is required to report child abuse, neglect, and maltreatment by law. That's an important addition there. Someone who has the responsibility to give information to necessary parties. I think putting those together is a fantastic definition, actually. Yeah, it's even more teamwork than what you realized. So if you look at this, let's see, we were on, I don't think these are numbered. We were on, oh, they are, page, let's go to page 3. So if you look at page 3, there is a long list of people who are considered to be mandated reporters. They are officials who are required to report or cause a report to be made. They might instruct someone else to do it, and because of their title being a mandated reporter. And they are supposed to make a report when they have reasonable cause to suspect that a child is an abused or maltreated child, or the parent, guardian, custodian, or other person legally responsible for the child comes before them in their professional or official capacity and states from personal knowledge, facts, conditions, and circumstances which, if correct, would render the child an abused or maltreated child. Long paragraph. We're going to take apart today all of those different pieces. So in your official capacity, what might that look like? So in your official capacity, you may be part of an institution, a school specifically, a college, an agency. So it is part of your job, and with those jobs, there has to be compliance that you would report. So looking at that list, everybody give me one who thinks they would fit under institutional reporting. Who might be that? Yes?
A school official.
A school official. So teacher, principal, guidance counselor, even a janitor. Yeah. Okay. What's another one?
Like a medical professional.
Yes. Yeah. So your pediatrician, counselor, someone in the medical field who is interacting with the person in any way. All right.
Social worker sometimes do.
Yeah. Social worker, definitely. Psychologist. Who else on that list might fit the institutional reporting? A lot of them, even clergy, okay, or any institution. So in New Hampshire, which this was new for me because coming from New York State, they were designated roles. All of these roles are designated roles. But in New Hampshire, everyone is a mandated reporter. True, everyone is a mandated reporter. So that's a little bit different. So we're going to get into that just a little bit more here. A mandated reporter is anyone who, in their capacity, whatever it is, sees someone who they suspect there might be child abuse or neglect. And then let's talk about this part. Mandated reporters' limited duty to report child abuse and neglect. One of the key things that stands out is in most states, it is only in your capacity of your job, okay? That's right, New Hampshire is just a little bit different because anybody is officially a mandated reporter. But in most states, if you're a teacher and you leave the classroom and you're walking down the street and you see something that is concerning, you are not necessarily mandated to report it if you don't know the child or you don't know the situation. If you are a teacher in your role and you're in a grocery store or something and you see one of the kids in your class or someone who knows you as a teacher, then you are operating in that role and you're a mandated reporter. So it's just a little bit different. So when you leave here and you find jobs in whatever state you're in, make sure this is something that you talk to your principal or your administrators about. What is your role as a mandated reporter in that state? Again, New Hampshire is everybody by their law. All right, so under New Hampshire law, every person who has a reason to suspect that a child has been abused or neglected is required to report that suspicion to their Department of Children, Youth, and Families of New Hampshire, Department of Health and Human Services, or directly to the police. And so that is the phone number, and they have someone there 8 to 4:30. Again, in other states it may differ some. speaking again from my knowledge of New York State, there's a 24-hour hotline. So again, whatever state you're in, you need to be aware of that particular state's rules and regulations. But as a teacher, it doesn't matter what state you're in, you would be a mandated reporter. All right, so as we get into it a little bit more, what if I'm mistaken? Okay, so what if I see something and I think, oh, that might be child abuse? Do you think you should report it? And you know, why?
Just in case. I mean, it doesn't hurt. Like, it could be helping.
But I might get in trouble. No? Why?
I mean, I was a mandated reporter in my other job. You're just protected.
Okay, yes. So there is a protection to it. Yeah. So you may have that fear that, oh no, what if I'm wrong? I don't want to get somebody in trouble. But at the same time, it might save somebody's life. It might turn a whole family around. As a foster parent, I had a lot of kids in and out of my home who had experienced abuse or neglect in some way. And when when I talk to people about it, they're like, I had one parent who actually said, "Do you walk down the street and just pick up kids?" You know, it's like, no. There has to be some kind of instance that has triggered for them to be put into the child protective system. And a lot of times, this is the moment. This is the very moment that helps a family turn around. It helps them. It's a wake-up call. It changes the whole direction. It may give. There may be court-mandated parenting classes that someone has to do, and the goal of the system, unlike what most people think, is just to remove kids. That is not the goal. The goal is to put families back together and try and make them more healthy. So a lot of times there'll be parenting classes or nutrition classes or some other classes. A lot of times we assume that everybody knows how to be a parent, right? We just assume, but that isn't the case. You know, in my previous roles, I've talked to parents who thought that, you know, Mountain Dew was the same thing as juice. So why wouldn't we put it in the baby's bottle? It's yellow. It's probably healthy, right? You know? So stuff like that, sometimes we assume, especially if we've been brought up in a home that had some solid parenting skills modeled, we don't realize that not everybody understands how to parent. So you will find that when you are in classrooms working with students. In New Hampshire, there's a law that states that any person who makes a report in good faith is immune from any civil or criminal liability. What do you think that means, good faith? What does that mean? Yeah. So it wasn't like, I'm mad at Kennedy and I'm gonna make a call and get her in trouble. No. It was, if you feel like that there might be an issue or might be a problem, then that's the time to make that call, and it won't be you're free from civil or criminal charges in that sense. All right. Can I remain anonymous? What do you think? It is situational somewhat, but you can remain anonymous. Sometimes, I mean, obviously, they might be parents or whoever the perpetrator might be can figure out who might have made a call. I mean, if the kid's only been at summer camp and home, let's figure this out. It's probably summer camp. But if the child showed up every day, no lunch, same clothes for a full week, and maybe had bruises, you might think, something's not right. And it can be a moment where real change can happen in that family. So the point is, though, you can remain anonymous. When you make that phone call, they will ask you your name, the person who's doing the intake with the phone call, but they will not share that name with the parents or with the, I keep saying parents, but really it could be any situation. It could be almost anywhere. So that will not be shared with the person who is being questioned. Okay, so like you may be concerned about possible retaliation if they discover you reported your concerns, but you are civilly and legally free from retaliation, prosecution. All right. So, when does law enforcement get involved? This is a really hard one. So, at what point would we call the police versus calling a hotline? Have any thoughts on that?
If the child's like immediate danger.
Okay, immediate danger, yes. Any other thoughts?
Maybe if there's like enough evidence that you see right away that you can report, you can make action quicker.
Okay, and that evidence would be evidence of a law broken. So the time when a police officer would be involved would be if a law was broken. So sexual assault, battery, possibly. So if you're thinking, well, maybe not everything is okay at home, but you don't have actual, there's no like blatant evidence, or then you wouldn't call the police, you would call the hotline. If you see that a law has been broken, or someone's life is in danger, or there's imminent danger to a person, that's when you would call the police. And then they would circle in with Child Protective Services from there. Okay? So what happens when a report comes in, when there is a call made, then it's forwarded to a district office for assessment, and a caseworker goes over the details and tries to figure out if this is really, if there's someone in imminent danger, or if there's something that they have to do right away. So there's a procedure that they follow, and they are legally required to go out within, I think it's 48 hours, and that may vary also by state. They're legally required to go out and see the child and question based upon what was called in, and see if the child seems to be okay or in danger. So then from there, there is an investigation that happens. If the child is in danger, they would remove the child. If they think the child's in danger, they would remove the child right away. If not, an investigation would take place, and they would question different people involved and see if they can figure out really what's going on. And then either when a case is closed, either they close the case or they refer it on to, for example, like family court to figure out what the next steps might be. Okay, so our definitions. Let's see how close you were. Abuse. So when we're talking about child abuse, this is when someone suspects, subjects, or inflicts or allows to be inflicted on a child serious physical injury. So, children harm, child under 18, good point, and physical, emotional, mental, psychological harms negatively affects the child. All right, you guys are really close. Very good. And it may also, one caveat here is that it could be a situation that creates or allows to be created substantial risk of serious physical harm or sexual abuse. So I had a child in my care, and the reason that he was brought into care, he had cigarette burns on his arm, and his mother did not do it, but his mother was charged because she knew about it and didn't do anything about it. So she allowed, so that's this phrase here, allows to be inflicted. So she knew about it and didn't respond appropriately to that. So she lost the child for a stretch of time until she had some more parenting skills, instruction. All right, so maltreatment, right? Denying or neglecting a child's life needs, food, hygiene, water, sleep, shelter, and love. And love. That's an interesting one. Can we legally mandate a child be loved?
I don't want to.
Oh, that's hard, isn't it? Because, and really, what is the fine line here between life needs, foods? If a child has a bath once a week, isn't that enough? They're stinky. But that's actually, I may say every other day, and Kiki may say once a week, and Kennedy may say once a month.
Oh my God.
Poor Kennedy. I picked every too much already. My point is that we have different standards, okay? And so, maybe Sonia feels like hot dogs and macaroni and cheese every night of the week and a Pop-Tart for breakfast is sufficient. And then maybe it's different for somebody else and they say, no, they need to have scrambled eggs and bacon and a 3-course meal for dinner and organic. So the hard thing is, I hope you're getting the point here, the hard thing is that there's a continuum of what's okay and what's not okay. And as a foster parent, I struggled with that because I felt like, oh, they're not clean enough, or they haven't been fed appropriately. But the law actually looks at more, have they been fed, not necessarily what it was. So this is part about love. It's more, have they been cared for? Have they had their physical needs met? That's hard, isn't it? Because as a teacher, these become your kids. You become like a protective mom or papa bear with these kids. And so it's hard sometimes, but you have to be careful about inflicting your standard on someone else, or your traditions, or your way of life on someone else, because it may be different. All right, so let's look at that definition. Maltreatment and neglect is a child whose physical, mental, or emotional condition has been impaired or in imminent danger, and a parent or custodian's failure to provide a minimum degree of care. So again, minimum degree, it's hard to define, but a caseworker going out would have a good idea of whether or not that was met. And then the types of neglect. It could be food, it could be clothing, it could be shelter, education, medical care, or supervision or guardianship. So, let's just say a single parent has a child, and maybe they're 8 years old, and they work in a factory at night, and they have to go to work, so they go to work, and is that at the same time, and there's no one home, the child goes to bed, they put the child to bed and go to work. Is that proper guardianship? Yeah, no, because they're minor, they should have someone overseeing them. So it's really tough though, because in that situation, what does the parent do? But they have to do something, because they wouldn't be appropriately cared for. All right, also, other types of neglect would include excessive corporal punishment. What is that? What is corporal punishment? Any ideas? Have you heard that before? It is spanking. It is, yes, spanking. It is physically, maybe spanking the fingers, maybe spanking the butt, but it is physically disciplining a child. So, is it okay to spank? Yeah, so different states again have different laws. My oldest son was a police officer in Indiana, and this was like 7 or 8 years ago. And he was on his days off. He was working at schools as a resource officer, and he found out that in Indiana, you are legally, you can legally allow a school official to spank the child if the parent is present.
Someone else is like that.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, I think I've never
Very
seen that.
I'm very do it.
So, and some southern states still allow that in school systems. I don't believe anywhere in Northeast, in our corridor of where you guys might likely be, allow any kind of corporal punishment, which is spanking in schools. At home, it's a different story. So the difference here is to the degree. So you said this was swat in the butt, but if there were marks that were left, then that is considered to be abuse. So, and if it's very cruel and doesn't fit the crime, so to speak, that could be considered abuse as well. Okay. All right. So, excessive corporal punishment, so over the top physical punishment, misuses of alcohol or other drugs. So if a parent is using alcohol and drugs in the presence of a child, it's very possible that would be also considered neglect because they are not able to take care of the child's needs. Abandonment, if they're left alone for any significant amount of time.
So how would you like if you suspected that or if a kid came and told you oh, my mom did drugs last night, how would you report that, or how would you go about saying that? Or if you see I don't know, if they had some kind of indication they were using drugs or something, how would you, I don't know, I guess phrase it? Or
Yeah, so it's a good question. You're not allowed to grill them like the investigator and find out everything, but you can ask a few questions to kind of determine if it was a safe situation. Were there other adults there, or were you there? Did you feel safe? If they ever say they don't feel safe, then, So then I would document it and put it, and then go to whoever the official person is in your school. It may be the administrator, or it may be the school nurse or social worker. But there is a chain of command for every school as to who you're supposed to report to. So I would definitely document it and tell that person, because it may be a comment said to you once, but then there may be 3 or 4 other things that are falling into place that you may not even be aware of. So that person knowing really could substantiate a call with that information. Yeah, it's hard because you don't want to get somebody in trouble, but again, you have a responsibility as a person who cares for children to make sure that they are safe. Okay, so all right, when a child falls down, where do they get hurt? So we're going to watch some fails, and these are things that have been submitted for funny videos and stuff. But I just wanted to kind of refresh your thoughts on childhood and when you fall down and where you oftentimes get hurt when you fall down. So if you scraping a knee sort of thing. So watch some of these, and I hate watching these. My husband thinks that they're funny, but I was oh, head injury, I just I can't take it. But for our purposes for today, we're gonna watch a little bit of this and think about where, whoops. Yeah. So I am gonna go back out to here. Can you see it? Oh. I wonder why. Let's start again. All right, Sonia.
Do you have the URL there? You can just bring it up on the internet.
Yeah.
Must be something to do with the software.
Are you using Liberty Mutual
we're gonna have a commercial.
Can you
No?
can you back out of whatever software this is?
Wow.
You have to do a different screen share. I was gonna say, what is screen share?
I shared the whole, well, I shared the desktop.
Say that again.
I shared the desktop, so whatever's on your screen should have came up, but it's not, so.
So how do I do it? So this is the.
And that's what it looks like right now.
Can you share it from yours with it?
Go back undergrad. You get different undergraduate. Cause you like math. I love you.
Yeah. So I'm wondering how to get out of this one here.
The only thing I can think of is
I
Excel.
guess I'll in yellow.
Yeah, I can do it.
Oh, that's cool. That would be really
I can't get back to my.
I got it. Or is that?
I can.
It's still up there.
Oh, it's in the PowerPoint right there.
Oh, is that what it's?
Sorry. I think about that all the time, actually. I was like budgeting, like, this is why you can't go right out into your.
There we go. There we go.
Okay with you. That's what I was looking at this place in Margaret, and I was like, doing it. Oh, you kind of think what I could pay for.
And
I'm looking at the lunch week for happy. I'm going to eat ramens. I'm gonna have to eat ramens for dinner and everything. I don't do It's so bad.
okay, so we won't do it. It doesn't want to.
Bummer.
Should we all just watch it on
We all watch it individually.
You can. Or maybe one of you pull it up and.
Oh, I want it, guys.
Oh, okay.
Gather around, children.
Here you go.
Thank you.
It's the same video.
So where are they getting hurt?
My face.
Yeah, the face a lot. And that is exactly right. They're top heavy. At this age, the head is You see it coming.
Watch me get it.
What's
So,
up?
this is gross. Okay, so where does he get hurt?
Face.
Face, elbows,
Head, knees.
yes. So here you can see the importance of gates.
It's the car for.
Not in the overall.
Oh, doesn't that hurt?
This is the.
Why would you let your child do that? Like, why are you?
It's just like a jungle gym. It's like a jungle gym with a playground.
Henry, that was the exact question.
Like, why are you
would
watching
someone
this?
allow that?
Why would you let your
You're
grandma
filming
get
it.
all this happy stuff?
Call the fire truck. Oh my god.
Ow.
So even that, where are they getting hurt? They're falling on their bone, they're hitting the back of their head.
Maybe their hands get some Yep.
They look like they're not asleep.
We just saw that parrot cry out.
So this is kind of inspection again, why do you just watch this and let it happen?
Survivors.
Right, I know.
Oh.
You see it coming, can't you?
Oh.
Oh no.
No.
I thought
Alright,
that
so where did he get hurt when he fell there?
the whole front of his body.
Yeah.
Especially the knees. You bend most of the time you fall. You catch with your knees, you catch with your hands.
With the hand. A little more turn.
Laugh at your brother.
Oh.
Yeah. Bird knocks the
You have to take that.
Okay, so we can turn it off, but I was just gonna show you this.
Maybe that'll-
You know,
10 minutes of this.
At least that one was like pushing me. This one was like
The one where the bird not literally knocked it off.
This is where you have those little palm pieces for people to.
Alright, so when they're falling down, it's natural and normal to try and catch yourself. Even it's an instinct, it's reflective. That's not right. Reflexive. I was like, reflective, that was not right. Reflexive, thank you. When you're falling, it's a reflex to try and catch yourself. So you're gonna get hit on the hands, you're gonna, knees are common. What are injuries you had as a child? Scraped knees all the time. Bruises where? On your knees. Your shins probably a lot. Yeah.
I got cut in my chin all the time.
Yeah, like
Okay.
When I would catch myself, I was.
Yeah.
I always see kids with bruises like
Yeah.
in the middle of their forehead.
I had
That's a circular tip.
a friend and I, what in the heck were we thinking? We were playing on her sister's tricycle, so we must have been like 5 or 6 years old, and she was on the front and I was in the back, and we blindfolded each other. Okay, and it was pushing you down the street, and we crashed, and like I scraped the side of my face on the curb, and ended up with stitches. Those are common things. As you saw, how many times they hit the front of their head or hit the back of their head. But so in the handout that I gave you, on page 4, there's a summary of those definitions for child abuse, maltreatment, and neglect. And then on the other side, you'll see on page 5, you will see this diagram here. So normal bruising is on the left. When they fall down, it's going to be their elbows, their knees, their shins. That's really, really typical. What is not typical is the back of the thighs. Any of those kids, did they hit the back of their thighs when they fell down? Probably not. You know, it's really unusual. The back of the calves is very unusual. On their butt, you're usually not going to see bruising when they fall down, you know. But if there were particular marks, then you would know that it wasn't a normal type of accident. So, especially like pediatricians and emergency room doctors, they really are pretty tuned into like what's a normal thing that they see 100 times a day and what is very suspicious. So this is not pleasant or fun to look at, but these are things, just examples of things that you might see that were not okay. So if there are particular lines like this, none of those kids falling down would have a line like this. So this was a lead cord, was the cause of that injury. If you see, I don't know if I'm here, you can see it real well from where you are, it is a handprint. If you see a handprint on a child's skin, that is not normal. The one on the bottom, this is a flat iron burn. So again, inside of the arm, rarely are they going to get, you know, where are your scars? Not on the inside of your arm typically, okay? So, yeah. So those are things to watch for in physical stuff.
Basketball. I wonder if that's because I'm missing chicken nuggets.
I played instant basketball and like wicked long fingernails and it bled for like days.
Not good. Yeah. All right. So there are 3 things that you want to look for. A child's physical indicators. So the things we were just talking about, things on the body, and then a child's behavioral indicators. Something is off. Something changes. And if a child acts a certain way every day, and then all of a sudden they're not. They're different, then you know their whole demeanor changes. Then that's a clue that something might be off. Another thing is parents' behavior. Are they not wanting to see you or talk to you or acting strangely in some way? That would be a clue that something is wrong. So if you look at page 6 in the handout, it has some examples of these. So unexplained bruises are physical indicators. Again, on the places that we wouldn't expect them. Unexplained burns. So a lot of times a child will come in and they'll have a bruise or something and say, oh wow, what happened? And they immediately can say, I was riding my bike and I fell. But if they start to go, and you can tell they're making up a story or their stories are inconsistent on how it happened, that's when it's a red flag. Especially unexplained injuries to the skull. Again, you can see in those videos things that are normal. They're going to get bruises on the forehead and on the nose, but when they have broken bones on the skull, that's a little bit more serious and scary as to how it might have happened. So then, like bite marks, things like that, and really, really important to watch for and document and report, if nowhere else, report to your school and so that it is on record. Behavioral indicators, if they're nervous about an adult coming near them or touching them, if they flinch when you're near them, if they have any emotional extremes, especially if it's a sudden onset, then that could be indicator. If they're frightened, specifically of their parents or guardians, that's another thing. If they're afraid to go home, or if they really, really, really don't want to go home, how about, a discussion, why not? And just see what happens. But again, don't be Sherlock Holmes and go too deep. Just kind of surface, see if they come out with something. A lot of times too, in children's drawings, they will draw things that they're thinking about that may have happened to them.
Can't you also not ask leading questions? Like, did mommy hit you?
No, do not ask leading questions. That is correct. Yes. Yeah, that would not be, maybe do you feel safe? That's a common one that they'll ask in a medical office, but but no, has anybody hit you, and has anybody met, no. Those are leading questions and actually could be taken wrongly and destroy any evidence that was there. Yeah, good point. So parents' behavioral indicators, things that a parent, may do if they have a lack of concern altogether. That could be a big problem. If they have inadequate or inappropriate explanations for why a child got hurt, if you know about the misuse of alcohol or drugs or substances, discipline that's too harsh, again, as a parent, there's a fine line. There's a certain right that you can have to discipline, but if it seems like it's really emotionally affecting the child, then that would be maybe time to step in and report that. If the parent talks about the child as being bad and evil, again, another red flag. Okay? Questions. I know this is not fun stuff, but it's really important. Questions. Anything? All right. So, those are physical abuse indicators. On the next couple of pages, there's maltreatment indicators and also sexual abuse indicators. So I would just recommend that you read down through those, and a lot of times they're very, very similar, some of the things, but important. I want to talk about sexual abuse for just a minute. So a child's physical indicators. One of the things, if a child has difficulty in walking or sitting, and sometimes we may jump to a conclusion that, oh no, there's something wrong, something's happened. In this instance, it may be good just to send them to the nurse, because sometimes it's even something like a urinary tract infection. So I've seen that before, where, so sometimes referring them to someone in the medical field, school nurse particularly, is a good idea. And in behavioral indicators, oftentimes it's usually extreme, and it's very out of the ordinary, which is when you have the red flag. All right. I'm going to give you a chance to stand up and to move around a little bit. Actually, I do want to cover one more thing before we do that. On page 9, the do's and don'ts. And Kiki, you touched on this already with your comment just a minute ago. Find things to do. Find a private place to talk. Remain calm. Be honest, open, and upfront with the child. I would say don't ever promise that you'll protect them. Promise that you'll take care of them. Promise that you'll make whatever the situation is go away, because you may not be able to fulfill that promise. But listen to them. Remain calm. And I would say not to be ruffled. They may say something that you want to go, but don't. Just refrain from showing your anger, and just listen. And then after you're not with the child, make the next step. One thing, stress that it's not the child's fault. A lot of times, kids who are abused or neglected feel like I deserved it. It's also the only thing they know. So, for example, when they're in foster care, when this happens, a lot of times, more than anything, they may have really suffered a lot of abuse, but they want to go home. They want to be back with that person. And on the outside, we go, how could you want that? But at the same time, that's security, because that's what they know. It's all that they've ever known. So, don't overact, make judgments, make promises, and don't interrogate, which is exactly what you just said, the leading stuff. Okay, especially in child abuse case, in sexual abuse. And in those instances, what they will do is they will have a trained investigator speak to the child, and usually it's in the presence of a school official, like the principal, administrator, or school nurse, and it's usually something like a state police investigator who comes in. And so that way it's really documented as to what was said, and they're trained in how to interrogate. It's a lot. It's heavy. Okay. So let's take like a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we're gonna do some case studies and apply some of the stuff we've been talking about. So 10-minute break, okay? So it's 10 o'clock, about 10 or 12 after. So, especially explanations that are inconsistent with your observations or your knowledge for that situation, that would be a reasonable suspicion, and in good faith, if you report it, then you should be fine. You'd have something called immunity. All right, so down below, this is New Hampshire in-state hotline number and out-of-state. So those are important things. Also, when you call, to have those things already, like the name of the child and their address and where the incident may have happened or what you noticed, the child's age, gender, race. These are all things that they will ask you. So if you're going to make a call, you might want to like write some of those down ahead of time so that you're not scrambling in the moment to know the answers to that. All right, so that's it for those handouts. I just left another one on your tabletop there, and we're going to split into 2 groups again. And so this time, I'm going to have Cassidy and Alex together, and then the other 3 together. So you can actually, one of you, or I want you to take your chairs and go into 2 separate areas. So you can move chairs around, these chairs or those chairs. And before you go, you have a scenario. So Cassidy and Alex, you are doing A and B. Scenario A and B. On the other 3, you are doing scenario C and D. So what I would like you to do is answer these 4 questions for each of these. Are there indicators present? So you have your handout with a lot of examples of indicators that there might be something wrong. So are there any indicators present? They may or may not be. Just hint. And then, is there a reasonable cause to suspect abuse or maltreatment? So again, reasonable cause. And then is there a parent or other person responsible? So who would you be making the report against? And then what are your next steps? Okay? So 4 points for your 2 case studies. Okay? Yeah, there's color pencils right there. supervisors?
Yes.
Okay.
We probably haven't met with her yet.
Okay. So did Andrew ever respond?
She's contacted before. Yeah.
I mean, technically the mom is responsible unless there's that decision, yes. But
Don't make a list.
the fact that she's kissing the dog is kind of. Or something.
Did I ever send you a big list of that? Like all the placements?
Yeah, there's like,
Let me just write it down, just.
I have it up,
Oh,
that
okay.
you sent me.
Oh, okay.
And then question mark with 2 at the end. There's 9 with question mark with 2.
Oh, yeah, those two. Can't get a hold of them. So. One of them, the last one there, I have a feeling it's a grad. It's hard to communicate, so I'm feeling that they're gonna work out.
I would say, yeah, there should be some.
We're gonna go see the new Paw Patrol movie tonight. Super excited. What is it? Paw Patrol.
Oh!
My
Yay!
cousins love Paw Patrol. Every time I babysit them, all
Yeah.
I do is watch it. Literally all they ever want to do.
My daughter's 4 and she loves Paw Patrol.
Cool.
She's very excited.
Alright, you guys all set?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Alright. Alright, so let's go over each one of these and see what you think about them. So, case study A. A female student has come to you and disclosed that she has been engaging in sexual intercourse with her mother's 38-year-old boyfriend for the past 2 months. The boyfriend has resided in the home with the child and her mother for the past 5 years and is responsible for the care of the child when the mother is at work. What indicators are present? Sexual assault by the caretaker. Okay, that's kind of clear cut, isn't it? And so, are there key things in this that would say that it would be the reason why it's assault?
He's 38.
She's 50.
Exactly. Exactly. So you have a minor and you have someone who's not. Okay. And is there reasonable cause to suspect abuse or maltreatment?
Yes.
Yes. Is there a person responsible?
The boyfriend definitely, and we don't know anything about the mom,
I think she knows about it.
Right, right. So in this case, if, as it goes on, mom's gonna have to make a decision. She will either lose this, I'm just telling you what will play out in the court system. She will lose this child, or if she keeps the boyfriend, she will lose the child. If there's a restraining order and he's not allowed near the child, then the child can come back home. So that will be how it will play out. But what is your next step as an educator?
You said you reported to whoever like the school person was, either a counselor, principal, like a caseworker or whatever, and then we weren't sure if we should be calling the police ourselves or if somebody else should.
So you should call the hotline and say that you suspect abuse. You could call the police department, but then they would probably refer it to the hotline, and then there would be an investigation. And if it was founded, if they call it founded, if it really thinks that it happened, then he would be arrested. So the police would then come in. So you probably could go wrong by calling the police, but the first step would typically be to call the hotline and your administrator. All right, good. B, a teacher observes 7-year-old Chris with a bruise to the right side of his face and scrapes along his right arm. Chris claims he fell off his bike. The child lives with his mother, a single parent. Chris is a very active child and at times can present challenging behaviors in the classroom. What indicators are present?
We didn't think I mean, the bruises and scrapes are an indicator, but like, we didn't think that this was a problem.
Okay, so the bruises and scrapes are an indicator to begin with. And then, is there a reasonable cause to suspect abuse or maltreatment? No. You know, one of the key things is the bruise or the scrape consistent with the story of how it happened? Would it make sense? Yeah, these would be consistent injuries with an accident, and the fact that it's along one side of the body, you can see it play out pretty easily. Is there a person responsible for suspected abuse or maltreatment? No. What are your next steps?
We said to monitor like the kid's body for more, like for suspicious
Yeah.
bruises and stuff, and just be vigilant.
So that's exactly right. To be vigilant, to keep watching. You might need to give first aid, hand out a Band-Aid, send a report home to the parent that they handed out a Band-Aid because of the scrape, or they went to the nurse or whatever. Whatever your school's protocol is for when first aid is given. And other than that, yeah, you were right. Good job, guys. All right. Case study C. Mary, a bright and outgoing third grade child in your class, has recently become quiet and withdrawn. The child has been coming to school late and in a disheveled state. Usually well prepared, her homework of late is not complete. In talking to Mary, you learn that Mary's mom recently took a new job, requiring her to work late hours, leaving Mary in the care of an older sibling who is rarely home to supervise Mary. Mary has been getting herself up in the morning, preparing her own breakfast, and getting herself to school. The mother gets angry with the children if they wake her up or help with homework or meal prep. You have attempted to contact Mary's mother to help resolve the situation, but she has not returned your calls or responded to the notes at home. What are indicators present?
We said that she suddenly became quiet and withdrawn because she's usually very outgoing and bright. She's coming to school late, which is uncharacteristic. She's not completing her homework, which is uncharacteristic, and the disheveled state, which is also uncharacteristic.
In her disclosure, because she admitted the lack of guardianship too. Yeah, good. Is there a reasonable cause to suspect abuse or maltreatment?
We said maltreatment because even though like she is eating and being able to get up and get to school, like if her mom doesn't go buy groceries, she can't make herself food.
Yeah.
And like her mom's not really taking care of her. Like yes, she's eating, but it's not being provided to her. Like she's
Right.
eating on her own.
Right. So there's not reasonable supervision being provided. Yeah. So that's definitely maltreatment. What are your next steps?
Since they've reached out and the mother hasn't responded, we would say document it, like give a list of everything that like she said and you've noticed, and then like proof of you reaching out to the mother so that like you have that on record, and then report it to the principal or whoever's in command of like mandatory reporting.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly. All right, good job with that one. Now, D, case study D. A special education teacher observes how Susan, a severely developmentally delayed 14-year-old student, changed her behavior lately. Susan cries often, grabs at her genitalia of her classmates, and she refuses to participate in school activities, even in arts and crafts, which she loved before. The teacher calls her mother, who states that Susan is just in a bad mood. The teacher also finds out that Susan's maternal uncle is now in the home and takes care of Susan when her mother goes to work. Susan refused to talk about her uncle or why she's upset. Susan's verbal skills are very limited and she might require an interpreter. What are the indicators present?
We said that she cries often, she's grabbing the genitalia of her classmates, she's refusing to participate. There's been a really sudden change in her mood and interests, and that there's a new paternal figure in the home.
Okay. And also, there are sexual behaviors inappropriate for that child's age.
Yeah.
So that is something, if a child in your classroom talks about things that are way beyond what a child that age should be even aware of or talking about or or touching or doing, that is an indicator. So that is definitely one to hear. Is there reasonable cause to suspect abuse or maltreatment?
We said suspect sexual abuse because of the
Good.
crime and genitalia.
And did you just say is the person who's the person responsible?
We said the uncle and possibly the mother if she's aware.
Your next steps.
Document it and report it to the principal or like have it like call the hotline. We think because since she hasn't like verbally said that she's been sexually abused, you can't really like call the police or anything.
Yeah.
And it also says that like her verbal skills are really limited, so that's kind of like a tough spot to be in as well. So we just said that we document it and report it or call the hotline.
And also, it's important to include when you call any relevant information about the child's developmental status. So if they have a developmental delay or disability, that would be important to include because it would clue the person in who you're speaking to that there's an exceptionality and there's things there that in dealing with the child they would need to know. Good. So you did a great job with those. There's two things I have left that I want to do with you. If you go to the Padlet, let's see what I do have. If you go to the Padlet, there is it goes up, so I'm not going to be able to get back to it very quickly, but you can. So if you're there, on the right-hand side, there is, in the far right, if you click on that, it'll open up a document. There should be what's that? This one? Yep, the far right. Yes. So it opens up, and if you download that, it has, this is a report of mandatory reporters in all of the different states. So you guys represent different states. And what I would like you to do very quickly is to look up, towards the end of the report, it has it listed by state. And I want you to look up who is a mandated reporter and what are the specifics around what you would be responsible for doing and knowing as a mandated reporter in that particular state. So you could do New Hampshire, but we just covered that pretty much. You could do the state that you grew up in, or another state you might be interested in teaching at within. So go ahead and look those up, and then I'm going to go down through and ask each one of you to give me just a tidbit of information about what you now know about that particular state being a mandated reporter. Yeah, click the download and it should open up. It should be like 68 pages or something like that. Yes, yes. That is huge, human trafficking.
I hadn't thought about it. But that's one of the things that like you make a report for now.
Mm-hmm.
In Massachusetts, and like another thing was like a church or like religious one are mandated to
Yes.
report.
Yeah. Why do you think that might be?
It's like a rule.
It's an institution, and it might be a spot where things are disclosed, you know.
Yeah.
Guys?
I chose Rhode Island, and the only section that says professionals required to report only lists physicians, nurse practitioners, other healthcare providers. The only professionals required to report. Doesn't include education, no religious, none of that. But reporting by other persons, just anybody who knows. So like as an individual, you have to report, but if like as like whatever your career is, you don't have to unless you're in the medical field. It looks like.
Yeah. A lot of states will have a hotline that's used for professionals, and then just a general hotline that's advertised out in the the public. But isn't it interesting how different it is from state to state? So that's one reason why I say be sure that wherever you go, that's one of the things you talk about. What do I need to know about being a mandated reporter and what's required in this state and this school in particular? Who else?
I had Oregon because I thought everybody else was going to Massachusetts. And I found out that there's like a good amount of professionals that are not required to report, like psychiatrists, psychologists, clergy members, and attorneys are not required to be mandated reporters. I just thought that was a little bit weird. Like people who are required to report are just basically like physicians and school employees and like police officers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is interesting, and you wonder why it differs from state to state, but there's autonomy in how states are governed. There's not a federal mandate, which would be how it would change. As it is, it's just mandated state by state. So interesting, good, thank you.
I did Colorado, and there's a ginormous list of mandatory reporters, which kind of makes me feel good, I guess. But some of them are like commercial film and photographic print processors. So like if there's any type of like photo or video that is processed or found, like they have to report it. And I never thought about that, but it like
It's not like
That, like, makes
like if you go to like CVS and you develop like a disposable camera like that.
Yeah.
so any of that, and then also like everything is on here, like animal protection and animal control officers, coaches, assistant coaches, athletic, like all kinds of people, and then it also says like the physician, patient, psychologist, client, and husband-wife privilege are not allowed as grounds for failing to report. So like even though you have that privilege, if that's going on, like if my husband was abusing a child, like just because I'm his wife, like I still have to report. And so I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, there's like a lot of people that I never even would have thought of that are like involved in this, and I think that's really good.
Yeah. I think probably the more the better, which
Yeah.
is probably why New Hampshire just said everybody's responsible. Everybody take responsibility. So it is interesting, and you brought up an interesting one, film processing.
Yeah.
People. It used to be way before your time. When we took pictures, we had this little roll of film that we put in our cameras, and that's how we developed pictures. And so at that point, that person was really significant because they would pick up on things. But now, so there's so much that's just all digital.
Yeah.
It's not as big of a thing. But yeah, very interesting. Okay, so this is our little end of class quiz. And, okay, is not graded, but we will grade it, more or less. Oh, yeah, I don't think we can.
You want the quiz?
All right, I'm gonna give you a minute to go through and write down what you think, and then we'll talk about each of these. Some of them are tricky.
Some of these are hard.
Yes, it is.
You have to go by gut feeling.
All right, let's go through them. So the first one. What do you think? Midday report is required to make an oral report immediately and submit a written report within 72 hours. It is true. No, I'm sorry. It is false. It is false. And it is,
I had false.
Is
Yeah.
it 72 hours?
It's-
Because false.
it's 48 hours. Yeah. Yeah. All right, second one, midday reporters should have clear and sufficient evidence before reporting any allegations or maltreatment. Why?
Because you're not supposed to try.
You don't need the evidence, you don't have this.
You just need a reasonable cause. And, yeah, you don't have to prove it, just a reasonable cause. Number 3, a maltreated child is under the age of 16, while an abused child is under the age of 18. Okay, that is false. And do you know why?
Because you like
Those are two different things.
any age child can
Yeah.
use or
It's all under 18, so any minor. However, there is one thing that I don't think I talked about. If you are a child with special needs or an exceptional, with exceptionalities, it is 21 if you are in any kind of program that's a continuing, like a day program or that sort of thing. So for a child who has special needs, it's 21 and under. Yeah, that's a little bit different. All right, the fourth one, public school teachers can be reported to the, public school teachers can be reported, turned in basically, if they mistreat a child in their classroom.
True.
It's actually false, because with a school teacher, the reason is, it's considered a criminal offense.
So what's the difference? So they would just be reported to the police? Or?
It could be the police, but it could be just the same hotline phone call.
Okay.
So, but the difference is your role. So it would actually be a criminal offense.
what is the state central register? I don't know what that is.
It's the phone number that you call. It's a
Oh,
CPS or, yeah.
Oh,
hotline.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, sorry. Yeah. And that language varies too, from state to state. But it's whatever your Department of Social Services, Child Protective Services, vocabulary would be. So So number 5, if a child discloses sexual abuse, be sure to interview the child thoroughly to obtain a detailed affidavit for court.
False.
Right. Right. Overstepping bounds there.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, if you and a coworker who are both mandated reporters observe the same incident or situation and both feel there is reasonable cause to suspect a child abuse or maltreatment, you are both required to call and report yourselves immediately. What is that?
I said true, but I'm kind of confused because, like,
Do
if
you both have to call, or can one of you call?
one, well, I would say one. Okay.
Right. So it is false, but you both can call, but only one of you has to call. So you can, duke it out who it's going to be. But it's not bad if you both do it. It's not required, but it's not bad. Okay? Number 7, a mandated reporter would be liable only if the original report was later determined unfounded.
What does unfounded mean?
Unfounded means it's not true. Founded means abuse or neglect actually did happen. So when they do an investigation, they'll term it founded or unfounded. So if it's founded, they can be prosecuted.
This one depends though if it was in good faith.
Yeah, I said false because if you made your report in good faith and with a real
I said
concern,
true for the opposite
then you
reason.
would be protected. But if you didn't and you just made it and then it didn't happen,
The key here is, in good faith is how you're supposed to do it, right? But the key is the mandated reporter's immunity from liability remains intact, irrespective of what the investigation outcome is. So it doesn't matter what happens in the outcome. Your immunity, if you did it in good faith, you have immunity. You won't get in trouble for it. So it's false, actually, yeah. And it's because it's, in this one it says it's, if it's determined unfounded, well, it doesn't matter how it's determined. You won't get in trouble for reporting in good faith. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say that, I think you're saying you can't get in trouble either way if it's unfounded, but if you were making one in bad faith that was unfounded,
then you get in trouble.
Yeah.
Right, because that was my example of just trying to get Kim in trouble.
Yeah.
So number 8, if a mandated reporter has a reasonable cause to suspect that a child is being maltreated or neglected and fails to report, this would be considered a Class A misdemeanor.
True.
It's true. It is true. And there could be a fine for that as well. I think it's up to $1,000. But again, that may differ from state to state, but it is a misdemeanor if you don't report it. Number 9, when a mandated reporter makes a report of Child Protective Services, every effort is made to maintain the source confidential. True. Yep. And then the last one, mandated reporters are required to inform the parents that a suspected child abuse maltreatment report is being made.
False.
Right.
Don't do that.
Hey, just let you know, I think you're kidding.
You're in trouble. Yeah. That's
Good job.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to make you write it down, but I want to ask you, do you have questions? Number 1. Any questions? And I thank you for being patient because this is hard, stuff to talk about, but again, it's super, super important. And give me one thing that stands out to you from today's discussion. Yes.
Just the difference between what abuse and maltreatment actually is.
Good.
He says not aware.
Good. Okay.
I watched a documentary on Netflix that was about a child who was abused and it went through the court case. Well, he actually ended up dying and it went through the court case of the social workers and the teacher. And ever since I watched that documentary, I've been freaked out about oh my gosh, I'm super nervous and stuff because I don't ever want that to happen. And so I think just learning about even just the little indicators, stuff that I wouldn't think of, it being hard for a child to sit down and stuff, I don't know, just those little indicators stood out to me because I'm always trying to think ooh, I don't want to miss something, I don't want to do that.
Excellent.
That was really fun.
Excellent. I'm really glad to hear that. And yeah, it's not something to be afraid of because you have protections built in. just as you're protecting someone else. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
I thought it was important to learn that, like, for kids with special needs, it's under 21. A lot of us are special languages, and it just isn't on this list.
Yes, and that could actually be a whole nother, hour or two on its own, but especially if they're if they're in an institution where they're having any kind of training or education or help. So it's under 21. Good.
I think it's important to note that you have to submit a report within 48 hours. 40.
Yeah. Why do you think that's so important? It is.
If you don't, then you know about this thing and it's going on longer than it should.
That's what the teacher did in that documentary. Is she like the kid had a black eye and she let him go home to the parents, even though he told her that his parents hit him. And then like she didn't make a report until after 48 hours, I'm pretty sure. And so then it didn't.
Jail.
Like nothing happened. Like she couldn't do anything because she waited too long. And she
Yeah.
let him go home with them.
Yeah. So especially if the child might be in imminent danger, that's really super important. Good. All right, guys. We are at
I have one question.
yes.
So if you believe your child is in, like, immediate danger and you call the police and the parents are there to, like, pick them up, like, can you, like, hold the child? Like,
Oh, that's really a tough one, and it wouldn't be your call as the educator. It would be the administrator's call probably. So if you actually called the police, I'm assuming they would intervene, and probably nothing. It would be out of your hands. They probably wouldn't immediately let them go home. They probably would talk and try and figure out what's going on. But again, if the only reason you would call a police officer versus a hotline would be if you know that there was a law broken, if there was something really significant and their life was in danger.
so in, like, that teacher's case, did she let him go home? Like,
He told his mom that he got like shot in the face with a BB gun, and the teacher he was like going to the bus and she was like didn't want to let him leave, but she was like I don't know what to do, so she let him go home. So then there's this big debate on what she should have done.
Yeah.
And
Should have had mandated reporter
yeah,
training.
and that she probably should have called the police in order to protect him from going home, because I would take that as immediate danger, right? If you got shot.
You go through your administrator.
Go to your administrator.
Go through your administrator.
I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
I need help, but I know this is going on.
Yeah. Go through the administrator, and if they're not available, go through the school nurse.
Yeah.
True.
All right.
In our case, scenario A with the 15-year-old and the 30-year-old boyfriend, where it's sexual assault, via caretaker, that's breaking the law. Is there a reason why we call it hotline instead of police at that point?
You could do either. You could do either, actually. But the hard thing is, is the 15-year-old telling the truth? There needs to be an investigation. I think you could do either. Training manual says to call the hotline, but I think in that case it would be clearly the police will be involved if a criminal law has been broken. So in that case, it's probably the case. So I think it'd be okay. I don't think you're wrong if you make a proactive decision to report and give you that immunity. And I don't think that you're wrong in whatever step that you take, as long as you do it in good faith.